problem with the candidate is if you're making a film about a man who's running for president, he can hardly say shit if he has a mouthful.
In 2012, documentary filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker received an honorary lifetime Oscar for his groundbreaking work over the past 6 decades. The man responsible for the definitive film about Bob Dylan, Don't Look Back, and the seminal behind-the-scenes political film The War Room, about Bill Clinton's successful run for the presidency, is still making his own documentaries. We met up with Penny in his hometown of New York City.
I wanted to start by asking you, at what point in your life you came to film? Because initially, I know your father was a commercial photographer, was he not?
Yes, in Chicago, right.
But you were, I was
an engineer.
Yeah, you came to it later, did you not?
Well, sort of. I spent 2 or 3 years in New York. It was just a great place to come and play, in a way. And I started a carpentry shop, here, and then I have one over on the east side. And for about 4 or 5 years, I just built furniture, which I really liked doing. And then I ran into a guy named Francis Thompson, and I helped him making a film. And one day we were going to screen it for somebody, and he wanted to try it out I had a projector in my apartment, in a little booth, and a turntable underneath so he could play music. And he ran the film as a rough cut of it, and that changed. When I saw it, I realized he'd done it all by himself. And
the penny dropped for you? That was the moment?
Well, it sort of did. Yeah, I sort of said, "Shit, I can do that." and
Okay.
and then I never thought about it again. But I've been doing that ever since.
So was it? I had read that you did out of this experience in meeting this guy, you did something called Daybreak Express.
Yeah.
What was that? Tell me about that.
Well, it's before we built a sync camera, what you did is you made silent films, and then you put something over them, music, Beatles music, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was a big Ellington fan, and I knew Ellington, and so we used one of his tracks as the track for it.
Mm-hmm. You knew Duke Ellington?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't know him very well, but he was down the Brill building. He had a little office down there, and I had a friend that knew him, and so I knocked on his door one day, and I said I had this film, and I had a little tiny projector and a wind-up tape recorder, and I showed it to him on the wall of his office, and he said, "That's great, kid. What do you need?" And I said, "Well, I probably need some kind of release from you." And he said, "Okay, I'll call up RCA and have them send you a tape." But what he did, and I didn't realize it, nor did his sister Ruth, who ran his company after he died, he gave me the song, which of course I didn't need. But then for a while she kept saying, "Well, I can't sell that to anybody because he gave it to you." So I had to arrange to give it back to her.
He gave you
He gave me the whole song.
The whole song?
He told him to turn it over to me. Well, he was kind of a strange person, you know.
It's pretty spectacular, I would have to say.
Well, it was just because the last thing, he thought I needed to own the song. But of course I didn't. I just wanted to be sure that Cootie Williams wasn't going to come after me with a big barbell. Because Cootie could get very upset about things like that.
You did, speaking of musicians, I guess this is a few years later, but you did a piece on a jazz musician, a guy named Dave Lambert, is that his name?
Dave Lambert, yeah.
Who subsequently died after
he was a friend. Well, he was killed in a car crash, yeah. He was helping somebody change a tire.
Really?
Yeah.
But you did, what was the basis of the film that you did on him? Was it just a profile of him? What was it?
No, he was a friend, and he helped me build a studio, actually. He was kind of a carpenter like I was, a frustrated carpenter. And so we got to know him pretty well. And I knew about him because he'd come from Chicago, and he was playing in the drummer. What was the drummer for Goodman? What was his name? Who had a band, and I think he had 4 trumpets in it. And David was arranging stuff for him, and he was a terrific arranger, a music arranger, and then he started getting these groups, and he had the Hendrix, Lambert, Hendrix, and Ross group, and then one day he said, "I got a new group. I got this." He had this girlfriend, and he'd put a group together, and they were going to go do a tryout at RCA, and I said, "Well, we'll come film it. You know, we film anything we could shoot in a day." We couldn't sell it. We couldn't get anybody even interested in looking at it. But we at least make the films. So we made a lot of short films. Yeah. And it wasn't until years later that we started distributing them.
Well, but the film that you made about Lambert was, my understanding is that it got seen, and Albert Grossman was one of the guys who saw it.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Albert came to see me about doing the film with Dylan. I don't know what he had seen. Didn't ask him. He just said, "Would I like to do a film with Dylan?"
Yeah.
And this was after, I think, Dave had been killed. I wasn't sure whether it was after David's death or not, but I had sort of decided in my head that I was put on earth to make films of musicians that I liked. It was really too late for me to do anything with Barrigan, or Goodman, but that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And so, and he said, "Would you like to go with us to England?" I said, "Sure."
Were you familiar with Dylan at that point?
Not really, no. I had heard he had 1-2 songs that were playing on the radio at the time, but no, I didn't know much about him at all. I mean, he was hanging down in the Village, I know.
Yeah.
But at the time, I wasn't spending much time in the Village, so I really didn't know.
Yeah. Did you have any restrictions put on you for the shooting from Grossman? None at all. Eh?
No, because I don't think Albert. I was paying for it really. So Albert figured it was all, you know, Albert was very open to possibility. He was never very didactic about what he needed or what people should do. And it got him into trouble sometimes, but on that film, I don't think anybody ever expected it to be distributed.
Yeah. Were you the only shooter? Did you have other shooters with you in that film?
No, I did. I had a guy with me, but I never used... later, we put a second film together, and we used some of the stuff he shot, because he shot some very nice stuff.
Yeah.
But at the time, I shot everything pretty much by myself.
I know there's that publicity shot of Dylan with you standing behind him with your camera on your shoulder, and I believe you're wearing a top hat.
Yeah.
Now tell me about over what period of time did that take place? Because it's kind of fuzzy in my mind. I remember seeing it when it came out.
Well, it took about a couple of months, 2 or 3 months.
Okay. So you got in fairly tight with those guys in that little retinue of people.
Well, you have to if you're going to film that kind of film. You have to be part of the group, part of the band. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have much interaction with Dylan himself during this whole thing?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But I never interviewed him or anything.
Yeah.
You don't do it like that kind of
Right.
film. You just watch.
Yeah.
And after a while, he got used to being watched, and he kind of got intrigued by it.
I think it was interesting because I just recently, in fact, this morning before we were shooting this, I watched 65 Revisited, which was, I guess, the film that used
that's where we
footage
used
of the other guy's stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's like watching a completely new film.
I know.
I mean, I've had it for a long time.
It's the friendlier Dylan.
It is. It's interesting because it's like they're two different guys.
Yeah. Well, the first one I wanted it to be about. I didn't want it to be a musical film. I mean, nobody really knew what a musical film was at that point. There hadn't been many, but I didn't want to be. I wanted it to be about a person who was really a kind of a poet, but who didn't really know it yet. And he was inventing himself as he went along.
Yes.
And so I made it about interactions with people. Later, I realized that some of the songs he did, the short songs, were really kind of love songs. And in England, they really like that kind of thing. It's, it's a kind of poetry, an English poetry base.
Yeah.
And so we decided to make that just to, to see what would happen.
Well, there are some, as I said, I've watched this documentary over and over again since I'm of a certain age,
Yeah.
And I've always found that there were, aside from the obvious scenes in it that garnered lots of attention, his dealing with the press and all those things, the things that always struck me were those moments when he was sitting either by himself at a piano or with Baez, maybe with a guitar, and he was just singing. He was just doing, or when he's playing for Tom Wilson when he's at the piano.
Yeah.
And you're listening to this guy doing things. You're basically watching him create as he's sitting there, and he seems completely oblivious to your camera.
Well, it was like we were both sort of doing the same thing. And what was interesting about that shot, I almost thought Wilson was sleeping because he looked so out of it. But Dylan played a very peculiar piano. It was a very clunky style. And if you didn't realize what he was trying to do, which was to write a song, it sounded like he didn't know how to play the piano very well.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't keep watching him. And so at one point, I made a version of the film, which he saw. I don't know if I sent it to him or he just saw it somehow, in which I cut that scene. And it was the only reaction he ever had to the film with me, which was he called me up and he said, I was looking at the film and I wanted to know, did you ever film anybody writing a song before? And I said, no. And he said, just one dude. And that was the end. So I put it all back in.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
It's it's interesting. Some of the things in there. So many of the images from that film have been referenced in other things over the years. I think of Tim Robbins' film Bob Roberts from
he did the whole film about it. So.
It was astonishing. I remember going to see that film, and I knew it was a political satire.
He did every scene, right?
I remember sitting in the theater by myself and going, "Oh my God!" and people turning to look at me because he had reproduced entire sequences of the film.
With the dialogue and everything.
Yeah, it was just quite astonishing. How does it make you feel when something like that happens? That you realize you've created something that's touched that kind of nerve?
Well, it's sort of interesting, and it was interesting to me when they did the film where the actress played the part of Dylan. What was her name?
Cate Blanchett. Yes.
And I thought she was fantastic.
She was.
I thought the film. It didn't. At least Robert's film tried to get at the reality of what it was about. I thought that film, they got Albert wrong and they got Bobby Newirth wrong, which was sort of too bad because then it flaws the whole
picture.
project.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when people take something and try to unwind it and do something else with it, and to see if they can make it. I don't mind that at all.
Tell me about Eat the Document, which is Dylan's version.
This was the second.
Your footage.
Said, well, yeah. The deal was you got your film with Don't Look Back. Now I want to make a film, but I'm going to have you be the cameraman, and I'm going to direct it. Well, he didn't know any more about directing than I did, so it turned out to be just a melange. But
it's horrible to watch. I got to tell you.
In the course of it. Well, I know, but the footage there, we'd made, North and I had made a version of it, about an hour version of it, which never got released. But I always thought it would be interesting, and now somebody told me it's on YouTube.
Is it?
I don't know how it got there.
I have a copy of it right
but
here.
everything we own, everything I've ever done is on YouTube.
Yes, I know. Yeah, and you still, you've made reference, I've seen in interviews that you've done to yet another version called Something Is Happening.
That's what that was.
That's the thing
that
you're
North
talking
and
about.
I did.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. And it's never been released.
No. I talked to Jeff about it, who really runs Dylan's life.
Yeah.
And I said, they're going to. The only way you can stop this thing from being unilaterally released on
get out in front of it
is you have to make a film and copyright it and go. And he said, "Well, we'll think about it." And that's. I mean, he knows he knows you something. The film, Something's Happening. He knows that film, and he feels like I do that it's a fantastic film that was made from the same material that Eat the Document was.
Okay.
But Eat the Document was made by Robbie was involved. There are various people who had other ideas about what it should be about. Some how much guitar they played or whatever.
Yeah.
So Dylan was never very happy with it.
Yeah. Now you went on to make a lot of other films with bands. I mean, you did Monterey Pop, which was an amazing.
And then we did the thing with the National.
That's right.
A couple years ago.
Yeah. But I've also read that both you and your wife have said that possibly one of your favorites is the film you made with Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
Which kind of startled me, actually, because they were never a favorite band of mine. But I also read, you saying
We just loved doing it.
You didn't know anything about them. You weren't sure, you thought all their songs sounded the same. By the time you were done, you had a completely different opinion of these guys.
Yeah. Well, we liked them. We got to be like a family, and we liked them all. And whenever they're around, we always go out and have a big meal or something. They're such a simple kind of concept coming out of the music industry, which was the working class kids. There were 3 of them, and then they brought in one more guy who was a good musician on the piano, and they figured the system was so marvelous that they put their backgrounds and drums and things all on a tape, played it off stage, and then they got out. And one of them, the guy who was kind of the leader, they don't even let him plug in his thing.
His keyboard?
Keyboard.
Yeah.
So that there's just really 2 people. and they made it so simple. But, they made probably more money last year in their tour than any other band
Really?
in the U.S. And people hardly know that.
Incredible.
Well, the people that come to their concerts never go to anybody else's.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah.
It's like a cult thing. They're like a bunch of
like the Dead. Like the
well,
Grateful
yeah,
Dead.
sort of.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the music, once you get the music kind of into your brain somehow, then it's terrific.
Yeah.
It's kind of modern in the way that Stravinsky was modern.
Okay. When you did Monterey Pop, that was unusual because that was a film. Nobody done that sort of thing before.
Well, they couldn't because you
concert
couldn't
on
have
film.
sync
There was
cameras.
no sync. Yeah. Okay. There's no sync.
That was
sound,
a simple thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was. You shot. It seems to me again. You shot an awful lot of footage on that because there always seems to be stuff coming up that wasn't in the original film.
We decided the film couldn't be endless. We wanted to be able to distribute it. Well, we thought it would be for television.
Okay.
And television really wasn't interested. Once they saw Hendrix banging away on his guitar, the head of ABC said, no, not on this network. So we then decided to go and put it in theaters, which meant that we had to kind of cut it in a theatrical way, edit it. And we weren't frightened of Hendrix or anybody else, which would have frightened TV at the time.
Yeah.
And so we got into distribution, which was complicated. I mean, we had to distribute it ourselves. We couldn't get a distributor to do it.
It's amazing when you think of it now, because
know.
it's just one of those things that everybody knows and everybody loves.
Well, the thing was that originally it was when the first 5-track sound came out, and the way you did it was you actually striped your prints. You had 2 mag tracks on each side of the print. That's the way they played the sound.
Okay.
So you had a stereo pair, you had a center, and then you had a surround. And I went out to try it out in theaters around the country. And I think there was only one theater that the surround worked. And I could see that it wasn't really up to working yet. So we eliminated the surround and only used the center track about 2 or 3 times for when somebody's talking. But hardly anybody ever talks in the film.
Yes.
So the rest was just what we call car stereo.
Yeah.
And car stereo was really terrific at that time. You could really pump a lot of juice into it. And so it sounded great on theaters that would have the stereo pair.
Just out of curiosity, I had always been told that was Otis Redding's last performance before he was killed. Was it?
It sure was.
It was, eh?
Yeah. I was editing, in fact, I was editing him when somebody told me he'd gone into the lake up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I know that's what made me treated in that weird way.
Yeah.
And later a woman came to me and said I could see his what she had some name for it. She was, and I could see his spirit in that, so I knew he was going to die. It was really made me very nervous.
Okay, all right.
Very nervous.
All right. Now, going back a bit in time here, in I guess 1960, you were involved with a bunch of other shooters, doing what became the documentary Primary about John Kennedy running against Hubert Humphrey for the
with Drew. That was when we were
with Drew
with Time
Associates,
Life,
right? Yeah. But so that was, you were doing political stuff then. But of course, what I want to talk about here is the other documentary, the big political one, which was the War Room.
War Room,
from
which
'92.
I did with my partner,
Yeah,
Chris.
Yeah, with Chris, yes. That, I watched it again recently.
Yeah.
That, too, is a breakthrough in many ways because you were allowed...
We just watched.
You just watched.
Yeah.
And to watch George Stephanopoulos and James Carville is riveting.
Well, yeah, the thing is, it's so simple to do, but generally, people in charge of making films don't think you're going to find out what you need to know. And we had it with Drew, too. Drew always wanted to put narration on.
Yeah.
And we always fought against that.
You don't have narration and you don't have interviews. It's just action.
No, yeah, I think it should produce... I think they're like plays for me. They're like theater. Mm-hmm. And theater has worked for a long time for people sitting in a seat who know that everybody on the stage is an actor and nothing's real. It provides a kind of sense of reality that they're able to abstract. Whereas if you have the stage manager come out and explain what's going on, as they did there was one play that they did that, it wrecked it for you because you're no longer able to imagine the substance of the reality. And so I thought it's better in the film then to just do it like theater does, which is pretend the whole thing is real and don't question it.
So in a documentary like The War Room, where you were given access to these guys in Little Rock and not to the candidate himself, Bill Clinton.
Well, we had we connected, but you know, the problem with the candidate is if you're making a film about a man who's running for president, he can hardly say shit if he has a mouthful, because the problem is that you're making a whole movie and he's trying to run for president.
That's right.
So
and he's got to say the same thing over and over again.
You become a much less a problem to deal with than anything else he's got on hand. So you get front porch politics, which is not too interesting. So in a way, we were lucky to not, although initially we thought that's what the film we were going to make. Because I'd started a film with Bobby Kennedy, and it was going to be about when he ran for president.
Right.
And happily, I didn't go to California with him, because I would have had to film him when he got shot. And that would have been a very hard thing.
When you're doing that, shooting any of this stuff, do you have those moments when you're thinking, when something's happening on the other side of your lens, and you go, this is it, this is golden?
Almost very seldom.
Really?
It's because the thing about doing it this way without any kind of direction or script or anything controlling what you're next going to do, everything seems very normal. You know, you're just sitting in a room with people, and it's very seldom that you see anything which is going to go up and be a big flag.
Okay.
You don't think of it that way. You're just you're it's like being with a band.
Huh.
You just play.
But as you say that, I'm thinking, well, okay, if I think about Don't Look Back, the Dylan film, I would have thought that there were a couple of things in there. His confrontation with that one journalist, the very state establishment kind of guy, where he basically disassembles the guy in front of an audience. Yeah. And then the scene in the hotel room with Donovan and all those other people where somebody throws something out the window and the officials arrive at the door. I would have thought, as you were filming, you're going, well, this is good stuff.
Well, I knew that when he did Baby Blue, the thing about it was that what people don't understand is Donovan was really big then in England. He was bigger than Dylan. So, and the fact that Donovan sort of came in and accepted that role that he took was interesting to me, and I really got to like Donovan. I've seen him recently since, and he understood kind of what was happening, as did Neuwirth. Neuwirth understood almost from the start what the film was going to be like, what we were trying to do. Yeah. And he helped in ways that I'd never talked to him about it, but I know that he made things happen without pushing on them.
Yeah. You had in that film what is probably, in fact, I think it is probably the only footage of John Lennon and Bob Dylan together, talking to each other.
That wasn't in that film. That was a later film.
Oh, it was a later one. Okay, see, now I'm getting them confused in my head. But yes, in the back of that
I knew John pretty well, actually, and I did several things, because he was in Keep on Rockin'.
Yeah.
And he came over because he knew we were shooting that. with the other guys, and later I took the film over to England and showed it to him at the house I had in Ascot, and I had to show it in his bedroom. We had to project it on a wall. I had a projector that would take sound and picture, and he was so excited to see it, and he kept getting Yoko to come in and watch, because these are the guys who, when he was in high school, were his heroes.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
to have them on a film, that just was so exciting for him. He kept saying, see that, and it got me. It sort of told me how to edit that film.
In our last couple of minutes, let me ask you about. I mean, you're still making films now.
Yes.
You told me before we started
Yes.
here that you're shooting now, and sometimes you're shooting with camera phones. The technology
yes.
is so much different from when you were using your hand-built ones back
Well, it's really, you still are looking to follow somebody whose cause interests you. You know, in this case, it's a lawyer who's for 30 years has wanted to figure out a way to protect animals, and so he has just in the last month or so put in a thing for chimpanzees in New York State, for 4 of them, and he's suing to have them recognized as legal persons. And of course they got rejected at the first entry, but he's going now to appeals, and so this case will, if he even gets one of them, it will be kind of a historic moment.
Okay, but I have to ask you though. Let me ask you this as last thing. A topic like that seems awfully. I mean, as groundbreaking as it would be if he was successful, the actual mechanics of doing that seems pretty dry and slow moving. Yes.
Well, anything with the law is slow moving, but you know, when you see a person's whole life, kind of his dreams of life, of doing something in his life, have to do with something which he knows well, which is law, which no other lawyer has ever attempted. The only other time it sort of happened was with slavery in England in the 18th century, when a slave went into a court, a slave, and for some reason that nobody has ever completely understood, the judge, who was a famous judge, said, "You're free." And in a sense, just for that one man, that was the end of slavery in England. So it's a thing that he sees animals. What you see if you study what's happened to animals in this country over the last 20 years, 50 years, they were used during the war, rockets. They sent them up into rockets. They've tested every kind of disease that you can think of.
And cosmetic.
And chimpanzees are almost people. You know, they're so close to being people. You can teach them to read and talk. It's astonishing that they're treated like furniture. They're just things. And what he wants to do is to see them perceived as people, as persons which have life protection. You can't enslave them. You can't eat them. You whatever. And that's his dream, to see somebody finally getting to where he can not necessarily realize it, but try it, is amazing.
Yeah. Well, good luck with it. And I really appreciate you coming in and doing this, by the way.
Okay.
I've been an admirer of yours for a great many years, and this is a real
thank you.
throll. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.